And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Greetings, everyone. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook. It is Monday, April 22nd, Earth Day, and this outlook will be for Tuesday and Wednesday. We start with the sea ice on this Monday afternoon, and we still have a fair amount of ice here within Kuskokwim Bay and around Nunavik Island up to St. Matthew. And with the wind flow we're going to have with a frontal system that's working its way up into the Pribilofs right now, it's an occluded front that's working northeastward and eastward. And the winds ahead of this are southeasterly, so the ice is not going to advance southward anymore. It may tend to pull a little westward, especially there in south of St. Matthew as we go through the day on Tuesday. And other than that, we're also anticipating a band of snow that could even be mixed with some rain at times with these gusty winds. So there could also be some blowing snow moving out of St. Paul that mixes with rain up into areas of the southwest coast, the YK deltas, including Nunavik Island, and then up here around Savunga, Gamble, there in St. Lawrence Island. There is a winter weather advisory in effect from early Tuesday morning through midnight Tuesday night due to the fact there will be some light accumulating snow with blowing snow and reduced visibility. So what's responsible for that weather is this fairly decent low located here out over the lower Bering, just to the north of the western Aleutians. And we have a low that's going to be located by early Tuesday morning just southeast of the eastern portion of the Gulf. And as we get into Tuesday afternoon, low bottoms out around 970 millibars there just north of the central Aleutians, with this wrapped around occluded front working its way up towards St. Lawrence and then up along the YK deltas. And then a secondary weaker low trying to form in the North Pacific south of the Alaska Peninsula, but this is not anticipated to become a major system by any means. Kind of late season. That's a pretty good system out there in the Bering for the end of April. And then just weak high pressure sitting here over the northern Gulf, southern mainland, and we anticipate areas of the interior, for the most part, will enjoy a dry afternoon. Can't rule out an isolated light shower, and also a few light showers in the southern parts of the Panhandle. And by the time we get into Wednesday, we continue to see the low sitting out here in the central Bering, starting to fill, coming up to 983 millibars. Secondary low, not all that impressive, down around 1,006 millibars, with weak high pressure holding along the Gulf Coast into south central areas. Some unsettled weather over northwestern Canada, kind of a scattering of enhanced daytime rain, snow showers in and over the mountains. Pretty typical for a springtime pattern when you have moisture and start to get that convection going. But looking for the marine forecast across the Panhandle, look for northwest winds, 10 knots there. Lynn Canal down through Stevens Passage. Southeast winds, though, to 20 knots with waves 3-4 feet around Ketchikan and Metlakatla. Offshore flow out of the east-northeast Sitka southward at 15 knots, and then generally northerly flow 10 to 15 knots outside of Yakutat Bay and west of Gustavus, with swells of 5 to 6, 7 feet at best. For Wednesday, winds will be northerly around 10 knots again for the upper middle channels of for the inner channels here of the Panhandle. Southerly winds to 10 knots there, Dixon Entrance, and then for the outer coast, winds will generally be northwesterly around 10 knots with swells 4 or 5 feet. Winds are going to be coming down across the western Gulf as well. Variable winds within Prince William Sound at 10 knots, as well as outside of Kayak Island and Hinchinbrook Entrance. Still northeast winds to about 20 knots, lower Cook Inlet at the entrance there. Northeast to north winds 15 knots, middle and upper Cook Inlet. And then for Wednesday, we see winds really fall off here in the northwestern Gulf because of that weak high pressure just in this region. Expect variable winds around 10 knots outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance and in through the main expanse of Prince William Sound and upper Cook Inlet, but still easterly winds to 20 knots, lower Cook Inlet and at the entrance of Cook Inlet, including areas northeast of Kodiak Island. Swells that way could be 4 to 5 feet. For Tuesday, winds will be northeasterly 15 to 20 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, but picking up, look for east-southeast winds upwards to 30 knots on the north side of the peninsula as we tail out toward Cold Bay. Waves could be as high as 6 to 8 feet there east and south of False Pass and around 4 feet there north of Cold Bay. For Wednesday, easterly winds around Kodiak Island at 20 knots. Those winds over a broad region of the Alaska Peninsula, either southeast to south, 15 to 20 knots. And then the Aleutians, this is where most of the wind will be. We have a low center north of the central Aleutians. Ahead of it, the front that's pushing through, we expect southwest to south winds picking up from 25 knots around Unalaska. Get west of Nikolsky westward, we're looking at 35 to 45 knot gales, some of the strongest winds, that area around Atka. And then further west, the winds go westerly to northwesterly to 40 knot gales, especially there west of Kiska. And for Wednesday, winds come down further, the low filling. We expect across the eastern and central Aleutians, south to southeast or south-southwest winds 25 knots. And then once you get west of Adak, westerly to northwesterly winds at 30 knots. And along the southwest coast, for Tuesday, easterly winds here in Bristol Bay. Southeast winds to 30 knots up there through Kuskokwim Bay and through Etolan Strait. East-southeast winds along the lower Yukon Delta. And generally in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. Matthew, southeast winds 30, 35 knots. Really no advancement of the ice. The ice might even pull westward a little bit there in the vicinity and south of St. Matthew. And then for Wednesday, winds across the southwest coast all the way from the Yukon Delta down into Bristol Bay, generally out of the southeast at 20 knots. East winds out of Norton Sound at 20 knots. And then with the low center, kind of just west there of St. Paul and St. Matthew, south winds at the Pribilov Islands to 25 knots, east winds to 30 knots at St. Matthew, and swells maybe as high as 12 feet. Across the far north and through the Bering Strait, we're looking at winds easterly 20 to 25 knots along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island. Generally northeast to east winds 10 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea. And then as we round up along the Arctic coast, easterly winds to 20 knots from Utqiagvik to Kaktovik. And on Wednesday, easterly winds continue across the entire region, 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast, Kaktovik to Utqiagvik. Briefly a bit stronger there off of Wainwright to 25 knots. Lower Chukchi Sea on through the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, out of Norton Sound. We're generally looking at easterly offshore flow right around 20 knots with that ice in place.